Hello my friends, just a few quick things before we start out this absolute leviathan of a video, the production of which was one of the most cursed I've experienced yet. Just don't ask. So, on top of everything else, I made two really dumb mistakes while recording here. In a large portion of the script towards the end, I repeatedly refer to a character named Sakata as Sakaba and Shinjuku as Shibuya. The former is due to me for many years, relying on a fan translation by, I think it was some dude at our university way back when, which incorrectly referred to him as Sakaba, so kind of force of habit. And Shinjuku, well, let's just say I've always gotten the two mixed up, and covering that goldfish manga hasn't helped. I just derped out while recording, so just head it off before the comments section is filled with "It's Sakata dude" or "It's Shinjuku dude." My apologies. But more importantly, one last thing. So, oi, you. Yes, you, pay attention. I know that some of you have been asking me to announce the really nasty stuff before the video starts. So yeah, this is one of maybe 3 or 4 insanely dark parts of Gantz. We will be dealing with some really heavy topics, including intense bullying, rape, racism, random gun violence directed at masses of civilians, and let's say self-uninstalling, oh YouTube. Remember when we didn't need to walk on eggshells? Can we get back to that one day, please? Okay, let's do this. I welcome you back to the world of Gantz, and I hope you enjoy your stay. Hello friends, this is the Owl, and today, as was so heavily requested, let's get back to Gantz. Now, I would be lying if I said that I hadn't been putting this video off a bit. Not because I disliked this arc, quite the contrary actually, but it's one of 2 that legit scare me, the other being the Osaka arc. That one scares me because it's basically a manga all to itself, and is going to be a nightmare to untangle, as well as a ton of cultural stuff. But this one, let's just say that it's going to require some very careful handling of a few segments and topics, one in particular as it goes into territory that YouTube does not enjoy. Oh, and it's also going to require an absolute ton of cultural explanation, because there's a lot here. Feel free to skip these tangents if you would like. I think I've got those frigging finicky bookmarks working again. That all said, this intermission leading into Hunt 5 kind of marks a turning point for Gantz in a big way. The first 4 hunts were good, all jank aside, but this one, oh man. There's a bit of a slow start, consisting of several mini-arcs that appear unconnected, or even arbitrary, but these lead into a bit where stuff really comes together, and then, without any exaggeration, we get what Jonathan Hickman and Terry Pratchett would refer to as a perfect moment. A moment as hype as Zaraki getting his Shikai, or me getting a new Albard patron, and from that moment on, no kidding, Gantz is going to burn white hot right through to the end of the second act. It is that good. And as we've got an absolute ton of ground to cover today, let's dive right on in. We open on, oh yeah, here we go. Meet Sakurai, my, let's say, favorite character in Gantz after Tae and a chap we'll meet in Hunt 5. But there's a lot to talk about here, so welcome to the first of many, many cultural tangents in this video. Again, you've been warned. Okay, so, as is immediately going to be obvious to anyone who knows a few things about Japanese symbolism, those flowers on his desk may seem innocuous to foreigners, but that's a mountain lily, I think, and placing flowers, specifically lilies, on a student's desk is something only done when that student dies, after which this will be set up to remember them, leaving their desk clear for the rest of the term or even the year, save for flowers and maybe a few keepsakes. However, putting flowers like this on a desk of a living student, it's basically the Japanese equivalent of saying, "I hope you die," or, you know, "please take the Hemingway exit." But it's honestly even stronger than that. You don't see it too much today, because of how overt and, well, gross it is. As I'll explain in just a bit, bullying isn't always treated correctly or even seriously, but yeah, doing this would kind of force your school's hand. Now, as you can probably guess, the first of our little mini-arcs revolves around bullying in Japanese schools. I explained this in some detail in the Another series, but as those videos are kind of old and kind of crap, I will go over it again here. Bullying is an enormous problem in Japanese schools and kind of always has been, but in many ways it's worse now than it was in the past. The reasons are quite interesting and do come down to how broken the Japanese educational system is and how every attempt to fix it somehow breaks things worse or in new and interesting ways. Kind of like letting snakes go in a mall because you have a rat problem and then releasing a mongoose to catch the snakes. 50 points if you get the reference. Mike Judge. I only just learned that you did not in fact make Bob's Burgers. But if you want to read a manga that is low-key all about how busted the Japanese education system is, My Hero Academia is well worth a read. So, classes have a tendency to single out one student and then just basically make their lives utter hell. There is a phrase, "the peg that stands up gets hammered down," which from the outside is often taken as an example of Japanese anti-exceptionalism, which frankly is not something I have ever seen in the wild. Gifted students tend to have the opposite problem, where they're treated like the damn chosen one and have even more pressure than usually placed on students in Japan, resulting in, you know, bakugo types. So I would look to them as the bully rather than the bullied in most cases. But it's probably just a product of the insanely stressful life Japanese students have at times. Remember, if you want to get anywhere, you're kind of expected to have your entire career path planned out by the end of middle school so that you can get into a good high school. Otherwise, you're sorta kinda doomed to a life of being a salaryman or working some shitty retail job, especially with Japan's ongoing 30-year recession and imploding social support systems. This results in what I've always referred to as Jonah students. Students that are selected, singled out, then bullied and excluded relentlessly as a sort of pressure valve for everyone else until they either become hikikomori or change schools. And that's in reasonably good schools. In the nastier schools, beatdowns and way worse are not uncommon, and I have seen some really ugly shit. We're talking framing an unliked student for cheating in the hopes of ruining their life forever. The weird and hard to understand part of all of this, well, From the outside, there's a really hard line in the sand regarding bullying. And yet, it constantly happens, despite students having to attend multiple anti-bullying assemblies every year, mandatory reporting measures for teachers, anonymous systems to speak up when a student is bullied, police visits, and intensive counseling programs. And yet, teachers just do not do diddly. Why? Well, in the past, teachers in Japanese schools maintained rigid order via liberal use of corporal punishment, producing adults that were highly productive, law-abiding, conformist, hardworking, and spectacularly broken people who would happily work a 14-hour shift, then go out hard drinking, come home, and terrorize their families. Despite corporal punishment in schools being de facto illegal after the end of World War II, it was used extensively well into the late 80s. And you can see this image of teachers as brutal and scary in a lot of manga from the era, probably the easiest example being Kazuo Umezu's Drifting Classroom. After corporal punishment was officially phased out, the balance of power shifted dramatically. When I started working in Japanese schools in the 2000s, you could get into serious hot water for simply speaking harshly to a student or raising your voice regardless of context. This means that teachers were given the impossible task of maintaining order and teaching without any real tools to consequence misbehaving students. Now, this is tolerable in good schools, but some schools, particularly in the inner cities, can be rough as all hell, with Yankee types everywhere and teachers legit scared to go to class. And I'm not exaggerating here. One of my first classes was one where the young female teacher had been groped, had things thrown at her, had been stabbed with a geometry compass, and was generally tormented and harassed to the point where I had to teach that mosh pit of a class solo, resulting in my bike tires being slashed. And yeah, this can mean that a teacher that attempts to intervene in bullying could become the target of harassment, vandalism, stalking, or even outright violence, to which they would have no recourse. They would be expected to handle it themselves and keep it to themselves. Trying to report it to their higher-ups would be taken as them being a bad teacher, and reporting it to the authorities would probably result in nothing much being done, and them then being blackballed from any other teaching position, essentially for bringing their school into disrepute. Part of the problem is this lack of power, coupled with a Japanese pedagogical practice known colloquially as mimamoru, to watch and care for, or to observe but care for, essentially telling teachers to stay out of inter-student conflicts and to just let the playground take care of itself. Add to this the fact that schools are now basically run by the PTA, who are, to some extent, always looking for an excuse to make a teacher's life hell. And yeah, maybe 1 in 3 teachers that I worked with in my over a decade spent teaching in Japan either didn't care to or were terrified to try regulating their class's behavior at all. There's also a concept I've spoken about before, wa, meaning something close to social harmony or peace. But in reality, this generally means keep your damn mouth shut and don't make waves, or you will regret it. One situation that I personally observed involved the utterly horrific bullying of a student, resulting in her basically hiding out at home after being rebuffed by everyone when she tried to report it. I approached the vice principal, if I recall, resulting in me being informed by my supervisor that I needed to shut up and just let it happen, that this was necessary for the class to focus, and it was better for them to destroy one student than potentially act antisocially in other respects. You know, and all of that. Meaning that if the students were stopped from bullying, they would find some other outlet, and that might be one that brings the school's image into disrepute or lowers the class grade average Japan. So yeah, It's a messy situation and results in school being a special kind of hell if you are, for whatever reason, singled out by your class. Teachers will be scared to intervene, not just because they will need to walk an impossible line to avoid getting clobbered by the fucking PTA, but because they could easily become a target of harassment themselves. There is, however, one dirty trick you can do. One employed in extremis by savvy and slightly more ruthless educators. If you are having significant trouble with one student, do not go to the vice principal, the principal, their homeroom teacher, the police, or anyone. They will not help you and may actually punish you for violating the law. What you do is, you go and talk to that student's club coordinator or sports coach, whatever team the little bastard is part of. Because especially if it's baseball, or it's almost always judo or basketball, the coach will be way less averse to yelling at them or, giving them a bit of a slap upside the head, right or wrong. But what if that coach is part of the problem? Well, let's read on. So Sakurai, a high schooler, is relentlessly and horrifically bullied by his class and other students at the school, having been singled out as one of these Jonas for whatever reason, likely him being a bit of a geek and socially awkward. This sort of nonsense does tend to be directed at these sorts of vulnerable students, but honestly, it can be entirely arbitrary. He mostly seems to spend his time dissociating with video games or posting on internet forums, generally referred to as boru or boards in Japan, a massively interesting subculture in its own right, and we will either get into that later on or whenever I get around to doing I Am a Hero. Holy crap, is that one going to be fun. But this is where we'll need to start treading a little carefully. Sakurai talks about taking himself out, and the internet being the internet even back then, everyone cheers him on or tells him to go ahead, some promising to follow suit. So he does. But, this is fun. His username is Cherry, which is a sort of derogatory, but also playful way of referring to a male virgin. Just be warned if you want to read this yourself. The soy sauce attempt is shown in a pretty graphic fashion. However, the attempt fails, as he's too scared to fully go through with it. But he does note, amongst all the people telling him to go ahead, there is a single reply from an enigmatic user called Sakata, telling him that maybe he can help. But it would have to be in person. Deciding that he has nothing much to lose, Sakurai invites him over, assuming that Sakata is offering to Kevorkian him. And sure enough, he shows up as a kind of try-hard wannabe skate punk, wearing sunglasses, a pentacle pendant, and a military jacket. Sakata enters, and they drink coffee together, and after some banter, lots of cultural stuff here, but there are already going to be way too many tangents. It becomes obvious that he isn't actually here to kill Sakurai. He's here to help him live. Sakurai, in turn, tells him to piss off. He doesn't want any life is sacred rubbish. His own is utterly wretched, and he just wants to end it here. But Sakata tells him that this isn't why he's here. Not at all. Then, oh wait, what? Is that? Yeah, this is where Gantz kind of takes a turn. Sakurai notices that his coffee is levitating as a ball of liquid, raised up out of the cup. I'll explain this in just a bit, but Sakata is, as it so happens, an Esper. Of course, his nose is bleeding too because tropes, okay, we'll get there. But regardless, Sakata demonstrates his power by levitating Sakurai and messing with his body, revealing that his telekinesis is both powerful and versatile, before explaining again that he did not come here to kill him. He is here to confer the power onto the boy so that he can turn things around, exacting retribution onto his tormentors. Because see, Sakata's situation was once the same. He was singled out and then bullied in an extreme manner, wanting his life to end, before he was granted psionics and got revenge. Yes, you can probably see where this is going. He killed his bullies and encourages Sakurai to do the same. After a bit more back and forth, he begins training Sakurai, telling him to start with light, then dust particles, drawing them through his fingers using his mind. And yes, if anyone tried this themselves after reading, you are not alone. It's Futai no Kiwami levels of, I know this won't work, but I kind of have to try, just in case. Yes, Sean, one day I will come for you. Sakata explains that the power has been granted by subtly modifying his brain and also by showing him what is possible. So long as he trains, his powers will continue to develop, and now it is up to him. However, he cannot hesitate. These bastards need to die. Sure enough, Sakata practices and is able to get the knack of it pretty fast, going from manipulating light and dust motes to moving small objects. We get some examples of his new abilities. He's got telekinesis and a kind of ESP, mostly represented as a sort of X-ray vision. Sakurai then goes back to the boards, saying that his attempt failed, but that he's changed his mind. He is, instead, going to wipe the bastards out, once and for all, so that they will stop, and I assume, so that they won't victimize anyone else in the way they victimized him. However, he is taken aback when a single user, tonkotsu, likely a nod towards a style of pork broth ramen, there may be some other colloquial meaning here that I'm not aware of, messages him saying not to do it. And while they bicker back and forth, he actually wins the argument, with Tonkotsu unable to give him any salient argument why killing genuinely evil people is wrong, aside from some circular "it's wrong because it's wrong" reasoning. And he thus decides to go through with it. But he's going to go about it in an intelligent way, one that, no matter what, he will not be punished for. Back in class, we indeed see what I was describing. Sakurai stops coming to school because, well, he gets bullied in a truly awful manner, and his teacher seems terrified to even address it, instead tiptoeing around the issue, likely himself afraid that the boys would target him if he tried to stop it. This is so scarily accurate, by the way. And what follows is a scene that we will need to censor heavily, so I will just summarize. We get a kind of fake out, where Sakurai is being dragged to the boys' bogs by the bullies, who happen to be a part of the soccer team. But the soccer coach shows up, and it seems that he is going to intervene, only, well, it turns out that he's part of it. And then, oh, this gets gross. Sakurai gets beaten and then given the prison bride treatment. Let's leave it at that. However, it turns out that this was all part of his plan, as he begins using his psionics to first give the rapist a testicular rupture, causing him to bleed out rapidly in an agonizing manner, then killing the rest despite their pleas for mercy, bursting blood vessels in their brains and hearts. Back in class, a badly beaten Sakurai listens as the students discuss the mysterious deaths, and while the police interview him and clearly suspect that he somehow killed the coach and the bullies, they naturally cannot prove anything. And okay, so let's do a quick tangent here, because this is legit fascinating. So, here, we have a mini-arc where a badly bullied student develops psionic abilities and, once pushed too far, uses them to to take a brutal revenge on their tormentors. If that sounds familiar, you're probably thinking of a book that became a movie. Wait, no, I'm talking about Carrie. Are you sure? When was that written again? Huh. Mind blown. It's like the Harry Potter and Gruesome Grange thing, I guess. But yeah, that's just odd. Anyway, Espers have been a mainstay in Japanese fiction going back absolute yonks. And while I've actually spent a good while trying to figure out why this would be such a thing, I've never figured it out. I do, however, have a theory that I guess is at least partially true, so bear with me. See, for the longest time, Western movies, especially horror, didn't really get much of a release in Japan, partially due to its insular nature, and partially due to extremely tough controls on content that relegated anything above a G rating to obscurity. However, in the late 70s and particularly the early 80s, these controls were relaxed, more foreign films started coming over, and some popular Western horror films got a release in Japan. What films actually got a release seems to depend on who you knew, or failing that, whose palms you were willing to grease. But if your film did so happen to be permitted, it was almost guaranteed to become a mainstay of Japanese popular culture, or failing that, powerful and influential cult status. It's why Jason Voorhees is even more recognizable in Japan than he is in the West to this day. Now, weirdly enough, 3 films got a Japanese release all around the same time, and while only one became close to iconic, all 3 definitely still do loom large in popular culture to some extent, in that their tropes pop up again and again. I am deadly serious. If you think about these movies, you will probably spot just a ton of influences and nods. The 3 being Firestarter, Carrie, and Scanners. The latter 2 you can see as clear as day in Gantz, with Sakurai's arc being very much Carrie White's, minus a crazy mum, and Scanners with all the head pops. Now, keeping in mind that this is my own personal theory, from here, all of this eventually coalesced into a tiny little film you probably haven't heard of. One that completely changed the landscape in terms of tropes, and also one that heavily featured Espers, and from there, it was random Espers go in basically everything. So yeah, that's the Owl's Espers theory of Japanese popular culture anyways. At home, Sakurai gets an email from Tonkotsu, the person who was trying to talk him out of his revenge plans, and they arrange to meet up by Kinokuniya, a large bookstore chain best known for an extensive selection of manga, designating Tonkotsu as a likely otaku, or at the very least a bit nerdy himself. Only when they meet, he is actually a plain but kind of attractive she, and that ends that bit for now. Don't worry, we will wrap back into it. Our next mini-arc shows, okay, there is a lot to cover here. The chapter is titled The Man from Hakata, which is likely a nod to Fukuoka City, previously known as Hakata, and this designates him as probably a bit of a hick, with Tokyoites tending to look at people from other prefectures, especially slightly more rural ones, like Fukuoka, as yokels. It's a thing. People in cities tend to regard people, not from cities, as your typical rural stupid. Meet Daizaemon Kaze, a sort of archaic name for a very idiosyncratic character. He is an enormous chap, dressed in stereotypical martial arts garb and wearing old school geta or wooden sandals, resulting in him getting a lot of funny looks, and yes, it feels like he's walked into Gantz from a completely different manga. There is a fair bit of fan debate on his influences. A lot of people say that Kaze is based on Ryu from the Street Fighter series, and yeah, I see it. But honestly, I've always seen him as an amalgam of Paul Phoenix and Heihachi Mishima from the decidedly okay fighting game series Tekken, which, as I recall, Oku is a fan of, and some of those games actually do themselves contain a few good nods to Gantz, including this dude who, spoiler, is 99% a nod to something we will encounter in the Kyoto arc. Kaze turns out to be... okay, so he's that character. Ye old wandering martial artist in search of strong opponents that feel like a character from a totally different manga and honestly a different time period. And yet Kaze is kind of a fan favorite. I do not get why, and while I do love the Dark Horse translation for the most part, the way they try to make Kaze sound like a bumpkin doesn't work right. In essence, people from rural parts of Japan tend to have very distinct dialects, or ben. A few I ran into as I traveled around Japan made comprehension kind of difficult, even with my, at the time, sort of okay understanding of Japanese. I think that the translator here is trying to turn ben into a southern drawl, but nah, writers don't do this. I think Stephen King talked about this in On Writing, which, despite my, let's say, wobbly opinion of the man, is still one of the best things he's ever written and one of the most indispensable tools for any aspiring author alongside elements of style. Regardless, because narrative causality, Kaze winds up in a fight with a bunch of bikers, and he naturally beats the stupid out of all of them Musou style. He then wanders Tokyo looking for stronger opponents, and this goes on for a bit. But he does wind up fighting Onizuka, remember the guy that Kato, rest in peace bro, ambushed and smacked around, but once again, the bully just gets battered. Ditto the next tough guy Kaze is directed to. Like, okay, we get it. Kaze is inhumanly strong and skilled, but we do get one slightly fun cultural nod. In his wandering, he winds up challenging a lot of school bosses. And no, I'm not doing a full tangent on this. This video is already going to be like 30% tangent. But if we do ever get to Holy Land, I will talk about it there. In a nutshell, the Japanese term bancho, or gang boss, in the modern era mostly refers to the toughest guy at school, generally as it pertains to the school's delinquents or Yankee squads. This is honestly one of those things that you will encounter far more in fiction than in reality, as it's not used much now, although it may have been more common back then, I don't know. Oh, one funny, although irrelevant usage is when you're talking about your own boss behind their back. When you think they're a bit of a tyrant or a bastard, you may refer to them as bancho, just trust me, don't try it as a foreigner. Eventually though, through the grapevine, Kaze learns about Kei, and alright, this is where we start getting some really good characterization and a bit of interesting development, so keep it in mind. After Kaze comes to school and challenges Kei, Tae, scared, tells him not to go. But of course Kei is wearing the Gantz suit, and after surviving Steve's attack, his bollocks are beginning to inflate again, so he agrees, which naturally upsets his bird, who is still massively traumatized from Steve's attack on the school. This is something to keep in the back of your mind for later. However, suit or no suit, Kaze actually smacks Kei around a fair bit. He's just too slippery and skilled for the young man to lay a hand on, despite his massively boosted strength. But due to his suit, Kaze can't really damage Kei either. Oh yeah, Kaze has this special move where he sort of slams people with his back, sending them flying. It's silly and impractical, but it does lead to an absolute fist pump moment way later, so again, back of your mind. Kei finally says sod it, knowing that Kaze won't be able to take him in a direct battle of strength. So he charges and tackles him through a damn building, and Kaze gets his bell rung, realizing for the first time that he's lost. But there must be something more going on. Kei, you colossal asshole. This is how you get your head popped. Sometime later, we get an interlude with Kei and Tae again. And yeah, this is a really sweet little romance story. They actually find a random hamster and decide to adopt it. And yeah, I am not made of stone. This is all just charming as hell. as we see that the two of them have gone from a couple to something a bit more significant. Going steady may be the most apropos term, but do people even say that anymore? I don't know. But they're clearly deeply in love, a real sort of love. Not the gigantic boobs and tons of sex idea that Kei had throughout the first act. This is more real and thus better. Remember, a lot of Gantz is just to some degree a metaphor for Kei growing up. It's a coming-of-age story and all of that. And yeah, Tae is just a fantastic character in her own right. And she really does elevate the story somehow beyond your standard teenage power fantasy and into a pretty good story in its own right. And speaking of coming-of-age stories that are better than they have any right to be, there was this movie, I think it was found footage or partially found footage, where a bunch of teenagers get psionic abilities, and one goes too far getting revenge on his bullies, and it's very good. Anyone know what that was called? But yeah, this all leads to some more fantastic character work. At school, Izumi's sorta kinda bird Ryoko tries to set him up with a friend, despite his protestations. Izumi, who, yeah, this guy, if you haven't already clicked, is trouble, actually goes a step further, telling Kei that he needs to remember why he started dating Tae. That he doesn't actually like her, he was just lonely and needy, and he has convinced himself that he cares. Dude, what is wrong with you? But yeah, this isn't a huge plot point, but it so happens that Izumi, if you haven't noticed it, actually has a bit of a thing for Tae. Nothing much comes of it really. Finally, Izumi and Ryoko basically browbeat Kei into exchanging emails with her, and it turns out that yeah, she is hot to trot and is extremely attractive. Kei, however, thinking it through, realizes that no, he's actually got a girl that he loves, and so he declines. Round of applause, folks. Our boy is growing up. Taking it a step further, Izumi tells Kei that he will show him the truth in a way that he won't be able to deny, telling him to hide, to stay out of sight, and to watch while he invites Tae to the roof and proceeds to... Okay, so he invites her to Disneyland with him, and there are a few allusions to this and nearby hotels as a sort of shorthand for come on a date with me and we will knock boots after. I'm gonna take a swing at this and say that I suspect they're talking about love hotels, which are, due to small apartments in Japan with paper-thin walls, engaging in a bit of rumpy-pumpy at home can actually be quite tricky in Japan. So, what a lot of couples do is go to special places called love hotels, which they're not quite as sleazy as you might imagine, although I'm sure that there is at least one that'll cater to sleaziness. Most of them are in fact rather pleasant, clean, private, and affordable affairs, and they often have themes which are kind of neat. Now, generally, these would not be open to high schoolers for obvious reasons, as some of them can get quite kinky in, I'll admit, rather fun ways. But especially in that era, well, when money talks, nobody walks. Tae, despite being asked out by a supernaturally good-looking boy, not only declines, but gives him a bit of a bollocking, saying that he is supposed to be Kei's friend, and thus he needs to wind this shit in immediately. So, not only has Kei matured a ton through this honest, wholesome, and far more healthy relationship, Tae has, yet again, revealed herself as a resolute, brave, and loyal companion, despite her rather unassuming appearance. Kei, frigging marry this one. We get a sequence later that, yeah, no, this one actually gets the allergies going, if you get my drift. Just, wow. Kei goes to school and, surprised, realizes that Tae isn't there. He starts to look around for some time, and then he asks people, and it turns out that nobody's heard of her. Wait, what? Starting to freak out a bit, he keeps asking and gets his answer. No girl named Tae has ever existed. He must have imagined her. Kei wakes up crying and, yeah, that was all a nightmare. And, holding her close, realizes just how much he loves her. The cure to his loneliness wasn't some supermodel with huge knockers or hollow sex. It was a real, genuine relationship with a good person like Tae. Damn it, Oku, stop writing this shit so well. This is so good. As I've always said, there is no such thing as a bad concept or a bad story. Well, there are, but you know where I'm going. A good author can elevate even the most cockamamie plot and make it genuinely good, and I honestly think that Oku does this here so well. But regardless, this makes Kei realize that he now has a purpose, rather than the power and the escapism offered by the Gantz missions. He has found a light in his life, far beyond that, and he never wants to leave Tae. Thus, Kei resolves to survive no matter what, to get 100 points, and to get out of Gantz once and for all. And that is going to take some doing. But as it's been a bit, the manga is actually about to start picking up speed again, and those of you who have read this know what's coming, and know why I have been, quite frankly, crapping myself. Because, yeah, this is a lot.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello all, this is Mrs. Owl, aka the other owl, aka the random snarky text interjections in Mr. Owl's videos. I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm offering a variety of my services at a very affordable price.
Phrasing?
Yeah, okay. But you know what I mean. And he better not have inserted that Archer clip over that.
Womp womp.
So for starters, my art commissions are still open. I can do everything from pixel art to animations to actual art. And if you want some examples of what I can do, I designed Mr. Owl's avatar, his intro, and all of his good thumbnails. Shh, don't tell him I said that. But if you want some fan art, an OC, an avatar, video thumbnails, an animation, or maybe a portrait or something for that important someone, whatever you want made, I'm sure we can figure something out. Now, to those of you aspiring authors, and there seem to be a good few of you on the Discord right now, I also have extensive experience proofreading and editing at a professional level, and I even design book covers. So whether it's a short story, a manga, a comic, or even academic essays or dissertations, I'm here to fix it up, polish it, and make sure it all works. And for those of you who've finished a book or graphic novel and are looking to get it read, we're offering a very special, all-inclusive editing and book cover package, and just to sweeten the deal, this will include a proper ad spot in one of Mr. Owl's videos. If you're interested, I'd snap that one up as soon as possible. So that's my side of things. If you're interested or want a quote or further information, hit me up at my business email or coffee, all links in the description. Much appreciated, and now we return to our regularly scheduled owl.
We see Kei, now resolute, is actually training, which is sort of cool and definitely a good decision. Remember, he's made a conscious choice to go absolutely mission monkey, get 100 points and get out of Gantz, so he and Tae can have a stable life together, and thus he wants to use his arsenal and gadgets more effectively. This will, believe it or not, have a payoff quite soon. Kei gets a phone call. It's Izumi, telling him to come to the school immediately. There's someone here that looks exactly like him, asleep in a classroom. Oh shitballs. Could this be another incursion from the Chibis? That's all they need right now, but oh holy crap mate, use your brain here. What is Izumi doing at school at night? But no, he dons the suit, then heads to the night darkened school, in the hopes that he can kill the bloody thing before it perpetrates another massacre. Like, I get it, Izumi is playing into Kei's guilt and trauma here, but still, this is a dumbass play. Oh right, yeah, the art here is really, really good, and it only gets better from here, trust me. Kei arrives, and it doesn't take long for him to realize that there is no alien. Instead, Izumi steps out of the shadows, wielding a handgun. We've talked a bit about gun ownership in Japan, and we'll go in depth one of these days, but short version, getting a handgun in Japan, especially a semi, takes resourcefulness, a good amount of cash, some luck, the right connections, and being willing to go to prison for a very, very long time. For a high schooler to get one, yeah, no, I am calling bullshit. Or at the very least, narrative contrivance, but whatever. The sequence needs a gun, so Izumi has a gun. Regardless, there is clearly way more to this hunk than meets the eye. He says he wants to talk, and we get a rambly and, to be frank, badly translated segment where the pair make awkward small talk about celebrities, including this stupid bit. The Japanese is kind of a funny, if slightly mean-spirited gag about Honjo Manami, a popular, if idiosyncratic Japanese actress and model, who people often describe as looking a bit like a duck. And Izumi says here that when Honjo went to the park, she walked into a pack of ducks and people couldn't tell her and the ducks apart. But Dark Horse changed it to her having a pet duck? I don't know. I'll be honest, I haven't actually read the raws here. I'm just remembering some of the early fan translations. It's not important. It's just also kind of, But this leads us into a revelation that I'm gonna guess about half of you saw coming. See, Izumi is a former Gantz hunter who managed to get 100 points and escape. As Nishi explained way back when, his memories of Gantz were erased, but reading Nishi's blog has made them start to return. Ditto meeting Kei and Steve's attack on the school. There is a lot of back and forth here, but it's mostly confirming stuff that we already know. Izumi wants Tae, he's basically a sociopath, and most of all, he wants to reverse his wish. Having left Gantz, he realizes how thin and grey his real life is. Yeah, contrast this with what Kei's been thinking. In some respects, Kei is actually way more mature than Izumi, because despite having nearly everything that a young man in that era could want, he's smart, he's strong, he's tall, he is inhumanly handsome, but he is still not satisfied. The sex becomes boring and meaningless very quickly. All women seem the same to him. Sport isn't a challenge as there are no real stakes. He finds academics too easy. So yeah, in order to regain a sense of purpose, Izumi wants back in. Kei asks him if he plans to just top himself with that pistol, and Izumi, laughing, says no. Likely seeing that he's searching for a way back in, Gantz has reached out to him and given him a mission. Kill people. A lot of people. Oh dears. And yes, apologies if my audio is a little tinny. I am filtering out a fairly aggressive 3-day rainstorm here, which, trust me, if you have an outdoorsy kid like Baby Owl to wrangle, is... Anyway. Kei tells Izumi to not even think about it, with him responding that, if he wanted to, Kei could kill him right now and save a lot of lives. But naturally, he won't, because under all the bluster, he regards Kei as a coward before Izumi shoots him in the head. Naturally, this just bonks him and knocks him back a few steps, as it appears that Izumi is only trying to goad Kei into taking him out, likely in the hopes that he'd go back to Gantz. Kei considers it, but finds that he can't. This isn't an alien. This is just a disturbed and dickish high schooler. Killing him in cold blood is a bit beyond Kei. Izumi is thus allowed to leave, saying that whatever happens next is on his head. He is going to do something absolutely heinous, and had Kei simply shot him down, it wouldn't have happened. And yes, it's a good moral quandary that has been done in a lot of media. Is it justified to preemptively take someone out in order to prevent them from killing a whole bunch of people? Well, ask Daredevil. But yeah, the next day we get, okay, this is kind of funny, but we'll talk about it in just a bit. The other students are gossiping about Izumi, not just his smarts, but his inhuman ability to play basketball, saying that he's like a black person. Yes, it's a thing, but again, we'll discuss this soon. Tae winds up interviewing Izumi in Kei's presence. I suspect for the school paper, and yeah, it's a well-written and wonderfully tense scene as the sociopathic hunk flawlessly pretends to be a perfect, good-hearted, and humble young man, much to Kei's abject terror. Yeah, dude, Izumi's as dangerous as a rattlesnake on methamphetamine. And later we see him at home, and there's a lot to unpack here. For starters, he's surrounded by, that's a lot of guns. Do not know where you got all of those, but do not like. And stranger, he has a professional-looking makeup kit, and it turns out that he's applying prosthetics and makeup to disguise himself as a black man. Okay, let's do this. So, speaking of discussions where we will have to tread very carefully, Japan's relationship with black people is very complicated. It's easy to dismiss the country as extremely racist, which, yeah, it can sometimes look like that, as Japan's a country that cannot even spell political correctness and tends to regard non-Japanese people with, at best, a sort of benevolent disdain. But it also depends tremendously on where you are and what you mean by racist, as well as how charitable you're feeling in the moment. Now, I talked this over with Mrs. Owl, who's a black lady, and I also reached out to a few mates from Japan and asked them if they had any stories and what their overall feelings were, and it was interestingly mixed, with some describing some outright bananas experiences with bigotry, while others at worst mostly encountered a sort of folksy, occasionally ignorant racism, or even flattering or oddly benevolent incidents. Again, complex topic. The first encounters Japan had with black Africans naturally occurred through trade during the 16th century, where they emerged from ships as slaves, and around that time, a man who would later be known as Yasuke entered the country alongside a missionary and wound up becoming a samurai for the legendary Oda Nobunaga. Well, allegedly, although the sensationalized and heavily fictionalized story is a lot more contentious and disputed than you'd think from a historical context. We may go into this one day, as while it's still awesome as all hell, it's probably not quite the Afro samurai tale that people imagine. Later, the Japanese were exposed to more black folks in the US military, and even later, via a lot of cultural exchange programs like JET. Have I ever talked about JET in a video? I don't think so. We must get around to that one of these days. In more modern times, or at least when Gantz was penned, Japanese folks generally approach black people with your standard, oh shit, it's a gaijin attitude, somewhere between curiosity, admiration, scorn, and fear. It's kind of messy, and this is where it starts getting anecdotal. On one hand, there are plenty of outright jaw-droppingly blatant examples you can find here and there, from people doing blackface and minstrel stuff to nasty discussions surrounding a mixed-race Japanese beauty pageant winner. It's really not hard to find stuff like that. Hell, even stories about black tourists not being permitted into certain areas or having people stand rather than sitting next to them on a bus or a train. But honestly, as someone that lived and worked over there for a large portion of his adult life, it's hard to separate this out from Japan's own insular and homogenous history and its general wariness around foreigners of any strike from any specific and direct bias against black folks, because, to be honest, foreigners of any other hue do tend to be treated similarly. Once again, it all depends on where you are. And what I will say is that it seems to be, perhaps counterintuitively, a lot easier to fit in the countryside. One of my good mates when I first arrived in Japan was a chap by the name of Freddy. The guy was 6'4" and pretty heavyset, looking like Michael Clark Duncan had taken up sumo. And he was assigned to a tiny Hinamizawa-esque mountain town, and despite struggling initially due to nobody speaking English, and the nearest train station being half an hour away by car, Yeah, if you don't have a train station, you are rural. But he wound up loving it. He lived there for half a decade, wound up speaking almost perfect Japanese, and then married a local and went full native. I think he's still up there. If I recall, they opened a bar together, and it was a moderate success. Kids were initially terrified of Freddy, but came to adore him fast, and he was referred to as Totoro-sensei, which, yeah, okay, that's a teeny bit racist, but it's also really cute. On the other hand, Mrs. Owl had people constantly trying to grab or touch her hair, one specific school position that tried everything under the sun to get her to quit, including some absolutely shocking comments made in her presence by co-workers, not being allowed into hot springs or restaurants, so yeah, it varies. But she was in the city, and as I've mentioned, for whatever reason, city folk tend to be more likely to be bigoted over there. I often wonder if people out in the sticks have so much on their minds that they aren't particularly concerned what you look like, as long as you work hard, don't make trouble, and do your best to fit into the community. Anime and manga tend to be a little contentious and run the gamut from terraformers, yeah, okay, you might have a point there, bloody hell, to stuff like this character from Naruto making me go, yeah, you're reaching. And one trope, alright, there's this phrase, and I cannot find any references to it online, but I have encountered it in the wild multiple times, and as a huge One Punch Man fan, I am 95% convinced that Super Alloy Blackluster's backstory is a direct nod to this. Coaches will tell students stuff like, exercise so much that you'll turn into a black person, or wow, you're getting so good at this you might be black, which, yeah, that's flattering as hell, but is it racist? Let me know in the comments. Again, insular and quite collectivist societies are going to have its issues with folks that look different, and the scene we're about to head into, an extended sequence that'll cap off this fantastic pre-Hunt 5 intermission, it's really something. And it's hard to tell whether Oku is playing into these tropes or deconstructing them. Again, let me know in the comments, because this is going to be a lot. Let's take a look. On the train, we see that Izumi in disguise is being hassled by a young Yankee type, asking where he knows him from. Is he a musician? Is he a sportsman? Does he know Will Smith? You see what I mean. This is exactly what folks in the city would wonder, seeing a black man in Japan that doesn't give off a touristy vibe. Again, this could be Oku dissecting a trope, or merely playing into it, but it's interesting. Izumi, gradually getting more annoyed, responds by telling him to get off with him in Shibuya if he wants to see something cool. And because the young man has no sense of narrative causality or ominous foreshadowing, he happily agrees. Dude, that's a sentence as loaded as, don't worry, you'll get what's coming to you. We get several pages of gorgeous composite artwork, showing us a peaceful and happy Shibuya, just kind of doing its thing and ticking along. And then we see, oh hey guys, it's Sakurai, Sakata, and Tonkotsu, who kind of just run into each other, or is this still their first meeting? I think it's actually the latter, but the chronology is unclear. As well as Kaze. Yeah, you can probably see what's coming. A lot of the plot threads we've set up are now being drawn together for the finale of this arc, and now we get to see all of them in a crisis sequence. Kei, meanwhile, is trying to convince himself that he doesn't care about some kind of mass casualty event, and that what Izumi does is none of his business, but because, again, he is genuinely developing into a decent character, he does not only the right thing, but the smart thing, calling up the police and telling them that something truly awful is about to unfold in Shibuya, but they don't believe him and dismiss him. As I will explain in just a bit, this is unbelievable in that era. Even a whiff of something like this coming would have had the full heavy squad on the move. Worse yet, Kei learns that Tae is taking Izumi's vacuous bird Ryoko to a film, presumably to tell her that her boyfriend is actually a bit of a cad, a word that really needs to make a comeback, by the way. And then it begins. the part that I always dread, and the part that I was genuinely unsure of how to approach in this video because it deals with subject matter that is the YouTube equivalent of black tar heroin. So I'm going to keep this short and as tasteful as possible. But just understand that there is almost nothing here I can describe in any detail, and I 100% defos cannot show you because I rather like this channel and don't want to lose it. Check it out for yourself if you want all of the nasty, but you've been warned. In short, what we get is an extended sequence where, using a variety of firearms, Izumi perpetrates a mass shooting on the streets of Shibuya. It is not drawn in any way that is fun or cute or your standard Gantz splatter. This is gritty, pitch black, and feels real, visceral, and I have to put a major content warning here if you do plan to read this yourself. It is sickening, and I suspect that this is, much like the massacre at Kaze School, a glimpse of what it looks like when Oku stops pulling his punches and begins commenting on a real and genuine event, or a series of events that not only shaped him, but completely changed the game in Japan. What do I mean? Well, yeah, as I said, a lot of tangents, but this is really important. The entire Shinjuku incident is almost certainly a pastiche of two truly ghastly things that happened in the 90s, one in the States and one in Japan. Let me set the scene. As the USA closed in on the millennium, with Marilyn Manson showing that shock rock was still profitable, moviegoers being blessed with a 1-2-3 combo of Green Mile, Fight Club, and The Matrix, and us gamers were eating good. Half-Life had just come out, changing the industry forever, Silent Hill was around, and System Shock 2 was the shit. But it wasn't all smiles and sunshine. On April the 20th, 1999, in the late morning, two American 12th graders, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, began a rampage at this school that would leave 13 students dead and rock the entire nation. You can look up the details of Columbine yourselves if you're so inclined, but this was one of the deadliest attacks of that nature, and not only inspired many copycats, but resulted in a national outcry, blaming music, gaming, and more, resulting in huge, if temporary, changes to the way that media did business, with films and games self-censoring tremendously, which is why Scream 3 was such a turd, and other countries, including Japan, getting very worried. Remember, Japan's biggest fear in the era was the rising generation turning out to be a bunch of good-for-nothing hooligans. And then, glancing over at the USA, what do they see happening but two troubled young men raining utter hell down upon their classmates? And you can clearly see echoes of this in Steve's attack on the school in the previous video. So yeah, that's Columbine. But what's even more influential on this sequence is an event that occurred in Japan in 1995. So yeah, this next bit deals with a cult known as Aum Shinrikyo, and we talked about them a fair bit in that sort of cursed anime and manga controversy video from ye olden days. Go check it out if you want there. But if you know who I'm talking about, you know what's coming. These bastards, Aum, let's just say that the term cults might be selling them short, because they were basically supervillains, with a ton of members, including scientists, journalists, influential scholars, and politicians. And they had their own weapons manufacturing plants, attack helicopters, had successfully developed biological weapons, and were pretty close to building a nuke. As has been said before, there's an alternate timeline out there where these guys killed all of us. They were basically Hydra, founded by a charismatic but completely insane guru by the name of Shoko Asahara. They'd been previously linked to similar attacks and incidents, including a smaller gas attack, the brutal murder of a journalist who tried to expose them, as well as his wife and child, bloody hell, and lesser crimes such as large-scale extortion, blackmail, and wiretapping, often to simply prevent negative coverage of the cults and to punish anyone who attempted to speak ill of them. These guys were utterly evil, utterly ruthless, and incredibly powerful. Looking into it a bit more, they were basically quite a substantial behind-the-scenes force in terms of Japanese politics back then, which, if you know anything about Aum, is legit frightening. However, the then dozy and complacent Japanese police force didn't bother investigating much, blaming their activities on foreigners, coincidence, and other individual actors, both due to their own desire to not rock the boat, remember, and also likely due to Aum pulling the strings. And again, honestly, Aum could have very easily wound up taking over the country had they been so minded, but instead, their leader's rapidly deteriorating mental state not only precluded them from this, but directed them to do, well, something so utterly horrible and so wild that, yet again, it would change Japan forever. On the 20th of March, 1995, Aum launched a coordinated attack on the Tokyo subway system. This attack, utilizing nerve gas, killed or badly injured almost 100 people and wounded 1,000. This incident was basically Japan's 9/11, absolutely altering the way the country did business. For starters, before the attack, the cult was basically just tolerated, but after, they were rounded up and everyone down from Asahara to the person that mowed their lawns was either executed or imprisoned for a significant amount of time. To head off future attacks, the police became incredibly militarized and active, now having almost unlimited powers of search, seizure, detention, and surveillance. Powers they still, by and large, retain to this day. Japanese citizens were terrified, and even now, you will find people in Tokyo a bit leery of using the subway, believing that one day something like this will happen again. And yeah, this sequence is almost 100% Oku referencing Columbine and Aum. In this sort of stark, genuinely nasty way, he is very much capturing the randomness and the terror of these attacks, as well as the fear that Columbine engendered in Japan in regards to guns and troubled teens. It is both bleak and completely understandable. And while I cannot show you much of this sequence, oh boy does it work, in that it makes me feel a little bit gross every time I read it. Let's do our best. Following Gantz's instructions to a T, Izumi is going for a body count here, roaming Shibuya Station and mowing people down with gunfire. It is stark and unpleasant and goes on for a while. Kei, meanwhile, is inbound to Shibuya, desperately trying to call Tae, but he cannot get through. The lines are, understandably, chock-a-block. But he does overhear some gossip, saying that something truly hideous is happening in Shibuya. We see his frustration and get confirmation that he is wearing his suit as he tries to puzzle this out. Izumi wants back into Gantz, and Gantz has instructed him to essentially just wipe out a whole bunch of people. But what else? What is the endgame here? Why is Gantz doing this? Well, he muses. Izumi would need to die too, so Kei makes a bit of a leap, inferring that Izumi is likely going to kill Tae in order to upset him enough for Kei to kill him. The business at school? Probably just Izumi feeling him out. And yeah, this is all just a mess. You really should have taken that shot, Kei. Trust me on this. Tae, meanwhile, is caught in a mob, fleeing with bullets whizzing by her, just slapping into people near her, but somehow missing until she begins to have a PTSD flashback to Steve's attack and promptly collapses, narrowly avoiding being trampled, which does in fact save her, as not noticing her, Izumi walks past, mowing down everyone nearby. Tae, to her horror, spies a pram, left abandoned, and because she's just an awesome human being, She grabs the baby inside, but it's too late. Still pouring bullets into the crowd, Izumi approaches. Knowing she's about to die, Tae falls to her knees, shielding the kid with her body, but then the gunfire stops. And folks, this is where Gantz as a whole locks in and begins to just shred, holding up a bullet-riddled corpse as a shield. Something that only ever works in fiction, by the way. Kaze works his way towards the gunman before hitting Izumi at full power with his backstrike, knocking him sprawling. Yep, it's time for the counterattack. Not to be outdone, Izumi rallies, and the two begin a nasty little fight, with Kaze hitting Izumi, and Izumi trying to land a burst on him, sustaining a good amount of damage, but finally succeeding in raking machine gun fire across Kaze's belly. Badly wounded, he nonetheless grabs Izumi and lifts him up with one hand, throttling him and trying to break his neck, giving Tae a chance to slip away with the baby. However, in a genuinely grisly sequence that I cannot show you much of, wow, this is gnarly, Izumi blacking out. Moving on, is able to fire a burst into Kaze's knees, destroying both of his legs and causing him to collapse, with them facing entirely the wrong way, bloody hell, before blowing off his head. Rest in peace, you big galoot, you really did not belong in this manga. And Izumi, injured but not down, resumes his all-out assault on the civilians of Shibuya. Meanwhile, Tonkotsu has injured her leg, so oh hell yeah, here we go. Sakurai and Sakaba are up next with, so The Matrix had just come out and was somehow even more influential in Japan than it was in the West. Seriously, everyone was doing nods and parodies, and to this day, certain gestures would be instantly recognizable to everyone aged 12 through 60. It's also one of Oku's favorites, and believe you me, that is going to become very obvious. Regardless, Sakaba jokes that no, he's not Neo, and thus cannot stop bullets. But Sakurai is skeptical. Why not? A bullet is just a piece of airborne metal. However, Oku, you may be a bit of an edgy boy and write like my first D&D campaign, where I tried to put literally everything I liked or was currently reading into it. But you do have a knack for character beats that, while arch and occasionally a little bit pat, really do give me the happy pants. It's like a hamburger. Basic takeout slop most of the time, but done right, a cheeseburger is one of the finest meals known to man. And Oku, you may occasionally use some weird toppings, but you make a damn fine cheeseburger. The pair of Espers discuss the matter. Sakurai wants to get stuck in and help, but Sakata is hesitant until they realize that their lives are worth less than those around them at an intrinsic level. Both of them are murderers, so they may as well do their best. If they were to die, no great loss. So it's Carrie White versus Elliot Rogers, and that is something I never knew I needed to see. Let's frigging go, boyos. Moving forward, Sakaba is indeed able to catch a bullet, which, while it stings, doesn't kill either of them, and then, shrouding himself in psionic energy, is able to stop the incoming volley from breaking his skin. I suspect it feels a bit like paintball. He and Sakurai then charge Izumi, who pours bullets into them from two, I'm gonna say Uzis, guns. But remember when I said that the Matrix nods were going to get steadily more and more overt? Just look at this. Regardless, their plan is to get in close and destroy Izumi's organs using their psionic powers. But sadly, while they are able to block hundreds, one round does slip through, punching through Sakaba's right eye and blowing out the back of his head. Jeez. With his mentor down, and seeing that Izumi is finally out of ammo, a weeping Sakurai rushes him, and despite Izumi beating the crap out of him, I guess he's had a lot of practice taking beatings, wow, that's dark, he is able to slam him backwards with a telekinetic blast, bowling him off his feet, and the two go head to head, while he's able to hold his own for a while, inflicting more and more damage on the mass shooter. Izumi eventually does quick draw a concealed pistol and shoots Sakurai through the shoulder, leading him to panic and make a crucial mistake. Rather than blowing up Izumi's heart or brain, or just going scanners and kaploding his head, for whatever reason, he instead tries to lift Izumi up into the air, presumably to drop him to his death, but this allows the psychopath to finally get a clear shot, triple tapping him, and Sakurai bites the dust. Damn man, too soon. You were a really cool chap. That's Gantz for you. Anyone can die at any time. And with all of our heroes dead, there is only one person left who can do diddly squat. It is time for our final showdown between Kei and Izumi. Arriving on scene, Kei immediately dashes out of the station in search of Tae. Understandably, he's really starting to bottle it. When he emerges, it's just carnage. Bullet-riddled corpses everywhere, but no sign of Tae. This is alarming and does not bode well at all. Actually, with the shooting over, we get a very Don Bluth moment, where a wandering Tae and a searching Kei just American tail past each other, but oh shit, there's Izumi, now out of his disguise, and yeah, okay, whatever. After the beatings you took, you should look like Sylvester Stallone at the end of Rocky, but because we need this for the climax, he tricks her into leaving with him, and then immediately chloroforms her. Womp womp. But thus, we enter the endgame. Kei quickly realizes that he was right on the money. Izumi sends him a photograph of an unconscious Tae, saying to come to his location with his gun, but without his suit. If he disobeys, she dies. We also get a bit more insight into Izumi. Despite his looks and intelligence, he's actually deeply insecure, envious of Kei's growth as a person and amazing girlfriend. So this is all at some level a weird attempt at one-upsmanship. I will give you a spoiler here though. While I would have loved to learn about Izumi's backstory and how he ended up the way he is, we never do, and that's kind of a missed opportunity. The pair of rivals meet and stare each other down, with Izumi saying that they're going to have an old-fashioned pistols at high noon duel. The rules are simple. They will count down, and after they do, he will fire on Kei with the ammo he has left, and Kei is welcome to use the X-pistol. Just to keep him motivated, Izumi tells Kei that if he loses, Tae dies too. I kind of wonder if this is Izumi trying to bring Tae into Gantz with him. But yeah, this dickhead needs to die. And so, they square up. Holy crap, the art is just mwah. While I'm not always the biggest fan of the Dark Horse translation, they have mastered and upscaled the art beautifully. As the countdown reaches 0, Izumi fires first, shooting Kei through the chest, succeeding in mortally wounding him before he can even get a shot off. Damn, man. Victorious, but kind of let down. The prick prepares to kill Tae out of, honestly, it's just petty spite at this point, and then presumably either a self-uninstall or an SBC. However, we see that this was actually Kei's plan. It's a good one, if kind of desperate and bonkers. From previous experience, he knew that he couldn't take Izumi in a straight-up gunfight, not without his suit. But if Kei can't win, maybe there's a way to just not lose. Or perhaps ensure that both of them lose. We see that Kei did indeed remember Kato's words, and that the X-pistol has a little used lock-on function. It takes a while, but once it's locked on, you basically get a magic bullet. The shots will seek, home in, and destroy its target. And this is what he was relying on. As Izumi slaps in a new clip, Kei, now locked on, fires prone and blows him to pieces. Holy frigging crap, that was good. See what I mean? And this is what Gantz is going to be like moving forwards, at least until the end of Act 2. It's so cool. And believe me, we are not done yet. A dying Kei remarks that this is it. He's sad, but oddly satisfied. Gantz gave him his second chance, and while he doesn't say it outright, it is obvious to the reader just how much Kei has been able to do with it. He went from a solipsistic little punk to a proper young man, and honestly something mildly heroic. At the very last, giving up his life to save Tae, the woman that he loves. Kei has, in many ways, grown up. And as things go dark, he smiles. And then it happens. This is it, chaps and chapettes. A perfect damn moment, and man, this is hype. Kei wakes in the Gantz room, wondering what the hell happened. At the last second, Gantz teleported him out, and for that reason, he was saved. His bullet wound healed. But what now? He needs 100 points to escape and be with Tae, but another solo hunt? Are they going to send him to face something like the Chibis? Something worse? Then Kei looks up and sees, chills, all the chills. There, standing ready to rock, suited up, we see, well, everyone. Sakata, Sakurai, hell, there's Kaze, and of course Izumi, as well as a whole bunch of other characters, one of whom, believe it or not, is going to be my favorite. Ladies and gentlemen, meet our new Gantz squad. All of that was introducing us to these four, who are going to have a big role to play in what's to come. It is time for the fifth hunt. One of two, let's call them pure hunts remaining to us, all the rest having some or other quirk to them. And I know that Hunt 5 is the favorite of a lot of people, and I get it. Only, thanks to Izumi, Kei is going to be going in without his suit again. And what is waiting for them this time is something that has to be seen to be believed. But that will wait until next time. Anyways, before we finish for the day, I just want to say a great big owl thanks, as always, to our amazing patrons, without whom this video probably wouldn't exist. I'm not kidding. If you're looking for someone to thank for making these folks are your first stop. Cheshire Quill, Melissa Marston, BK, Taylor Smith, Ang, Alice Teacup, Mally Pepper, Sam Glasper, Brendan, Majestic, The Spilled Milk, Kamarian Lindsay, Taylor Smith, Tak2M, Sefith, Anna MC, Mew Haku, Huna Hexchen, Adclaire Andrew, Nate Corbin, Fluffy Burb, Kamolian, Endymion, Jake, The Empress, Simone, Squid, The Hedgehog Gamer, Rafferty, #Hermit, Yorgborg, William, Oishipan, Erin Arnold, Sallyface, Kozen Doji 180, Mootle, Hamwise the Stout, Gunslinger Zero, Jalen R, Mike, Chilled Ice, Ranger Danger, Rose Montgomery, Inukie Koji, John Nepp, Kel Core, Opinion Custard, Robert Dote, Wargle, Hunting for R2D2, Lee, Eleanor, Crazy, Question Man 6, Callie Caris, JL, Lawrence Goebel, Piece of Yeast, Cheddar, Lightspeed, Jathis, Fogweaver, and Polite Crow. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, and all that good jazz. It really helps the videos out in the algorithm and otherwise. If you do want to support the channel, please consider patroning up. You will gain access to some pretty fun perks like exclusive emotes on the Discord, an exclusive channel, early access to videos, an exclusive video, and probably more in the future. Oh yeah, and my book. White Whistles and Owlbard patrons can also commission videos and deep dives, and patrons as a whole have a lot of input on what manga I cover and how. If you want to support us in other ways, you could leave us a super thanks, and Mrs. Owl's art commissions are still open. So if you're looking for some art as a birthday present or something, or just an OC, all of her links are in the description. Cheers my friends, and thanks again. Until next time, this is the Owl, signing off. Oh, hey, you're still here. I'm not quite sure why. I was just, working on that Starving Anonymous script. Nothing else, I promise. But yes, hello to all of you curious, persistent, or most likely just those who have us on in the background while they play that new Doom or work on art and didn't bother switching over. Anyways, unfortunately, in the process of putting together this monstrosity of a video, our rent went up yet again and we lost a big patron. So yeah, this is getting hairy now. Whew, the economy. And so, in order to make ends meet, we will be doing a big special patron / I guess channel memberships drive in mid-July. The goal is to get our monthly amount up to a certain level, just enough to give us a bit of breathing room, and so, as I don't like e-begging, I do want to offer some fun stuff in exchange. Sort of rewards, incentives, for getting it past a certain point, and hopefully keeping it there. So, at present, for certain milestones, I've got the following ideas. At the first milestone, I will release a prototype owl that Mrs. Owl worked on way back when. Trust me, this thing is just, it's wonderfully cursed. And you will all get a big chuckle over what the owl may well have looked like had we, gone with that first awful design. It's extremely funny and quite something. At the second milestone, Mrs. Owl will do a guest video for the channel. Likely a one-shot on something she likes, an isekai perhaps. I know there's this Tumpty gluttony thing that she enjoys, and I know you've asked me about it. Does anyone remember what the full title was? At the third, I will do a playthrough of something. Maybe the new Silent Hill when it comes out, as it's by the Higurashi folks. I'll be doing it in the same way I did Binary Star. We will do a poll or something close to the time. And lastly, if we so happen to get it to the final milestone, I will be pulling out all the stops, negotiating with Mrs. Owl, and committing to an extra video every month. So that will be more Owl content, so long as we can maintain that increased milestone. But this is in July, so keep your ears pricked for further news about it. And it's going to be a lot of fun regardless. Let me know in the comments if there is anything you would specifically like to see as a milestone. Other than that, 25k is on the horizon, so we'll be doing an AMA for that. I've already got a few questions, and I will do my best to answer all of them, well, at least those that aren't too personal or too political. Last year was a lot of fun, so I'm going to go and get back to work, I am going to go and change a baby owl who smells funny. Yesterday she came over and showed me a turd, so let's try and avoid that. I will see you all next time. Cheers, take care my friends. This is the Owl, signing off.